Here on the Business Immigration Benchmark, we're often speaking to global immigration specialists or folks that work in immigration, like myself, day in and day out. Today, we have a special treat. We have a true gem of a HR generalist, Leigh Tarzian. And Lee's going to chat about how she supports immigration programs and is a Jane of all trades. Leigh, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to get to talk to you. Haven't done that really in a while. I'm Leigh Tarzian. I've been in HR off and on since 1991 when I got my first role in HR. I've always been a generalist. And with that, it's about being a Jill of all trades. And to me, and how it was always defined by my grandmother was having a lot of, broad knowledge. I know a little bit about a whole lot of topics. And so you are somewhat knowledgeable, and it is easy to say, yeah, here's what I know. Give me a little time and I'll come back to you with, something a little stronger. That is me. I know a whole lot, but it's rather shallow.
Fair enough. Um, so you've been in HR for a few years now. Tell us about leading a successful career in HR. Like, what are some of your highlights, or how are you defining success, and what does it mean, in the HR space?
For me, it's literally about getting to do a whole lot of different things. I don't necessarily have a boring day. I am not, doing the same thing 8 hours a day every day. In HR, you get a lot of, and even a legal professional, you get a lot of the same questions, but there's always nuances. There's always going to be some differences in where we place our focus. So for me, it's gaining that and continually keeping up with that broad spectrum of knowledge from the multiple facets of the HR profession. And in the US, the governing body for our profession is the Society for Human Resources Management. We just shorten it and say SHRM. So they have what we have to learn, and it is called the Body of Applied Skills and Knowledge, which gives us kind of that baseline to be successful in our profession. And it's also what we're tested on. So, for any profession to be recognized, there's testing, there's certification. HR is no different. And so, for that body of work, we have to study leadership and navigation, ethical practice, communication, inclusion and diversity, relationship management, global mindset, business acumen, consultation, analytical aptitude. That's a whole lot. And that's why you find people specialize.
Right. I was just gonna say, like, all those terms to define a generalist are quite intense in the sense of, like, that, yeah, I've only really thought about how you could master one of those things. And then I don't even know if you've mentioned almost the, like, employment law piece that you're also involved with too, that, like, in going to SHRM conferences, yeah, like, that is there's always a lot of employment attorneys in this space coaching through HR. What's something you know now in your career that you wish you would have known starting out?
Early on, so early 90s, I had some fantastic managers. I really did. But things were presented to me as you must. Thou shalt have in depth knowledge in all facets. And the reality, guess what? I didn't know everything. I didn't have to have the answer on the tip of my tongue. Realistically, what we rely on is the ability to research, to know who do I go talk to get this answer? Where do I go? Back then it was encyclopedias, now it's the internet. It's about knowing where to get that information.
Yeah, like, as a generalist, it sounds like, connecting and knowing how to use your resources is the strength, and I think that as a, even a junior attorney, one of my fears was, "What if I'm on a call and I don't have the answer?" And that people are okay with, "Let me get back to you," and it sounds like that's a practice that, you have mastered as well. Like the people want you to get them the right answer, and then it is okay to say, I'm gonna look into that for you and I'll get back to you. And then of course get back to them. No, I know as a junior self, that's something that I would tell myself too, is like, you don't have to have all the answers in that moment. In fact, people prefer you do the extra legwork, the research, and then go back and get it. I've come to know you through your involvement with the HR Southwest Conference. How did you get involved, and what has your involvement meant to you both personally and professionally?
The HR Southwest Conference is the state conference for the state of Texas, for SHRM. So, national, by the way, national this year is in San Diego. If you want to go, that one's in June. Um, and we're recording this in 2025. The HR Southwest Conference, it's truly one of the best in the country. Even SHRM will tell you that. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Texan. Um, I was introduced to this event by a former manager who was highly involved in SHRM and particularly our Midland Odessa SHRM chapter. She was a past president. And she presented me with an opportunity to attend at the expense of the company. That's a big deal. Conferences are
Yeah.
not cheap. So she gave me that opportunity. And this was somewhere between 2006, 2010, somewhere in there. And it provided me with introductions to professionals, to speakers, some that I had heard and admired. The second year I went to the conference, there was a call for people who wanted to do some minimal volunteer work. We were at conference already. Is there anything we want to do to help? So I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So I was directing traffic. I was in the rooms, taking attendance. What's the head count for this speaker? What is it for that speaker? I introduced some speakers and I loved it. So that gave me those connections to these really knowledgeable people. And I can still call on them to this day. Hey, I need a little help. I am struggling with X. Can you give me some insights? And it's great because it's now 2025 and I'm calling people I met in 2006, 2010. And it's a way to continue lifelong learning and just, your personal growth as well as your professional growth.
I love that. The strength of the network,
Mhm.
is amazing, both, like you said, for lifelong learning and, when you need to get to the bottom of a crazy question and that the more people you know, the more situations they've handled that they're like, "Oh, I've dealt with this before," and that you don't feel so alone in navigating what could be a really tough issue.
And if they don't have it, they'll introduce you to somebody who
Right.
does.
Yeah.
So it's exponential.
Yeah, no kidding, like, you get access to their networks too.
Mhm.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've come to really like the HR Southwest conference, both to reconnect with you, but the content and the quality of people that I've met in the past 2 years has really been fantastic. And I myself have kept up some of those relationships. An employment attorney and I have kept a conversation over an issue I'm very interested in with the non competes and things like that that
Oh,
I've
yeah.
encountered
Those are
uh,
fun, aren't they?
yeah, super fun, and that, it's been a dynamic space. It obviously changes state to state, and as someone who needs, access to, the laws in Texas, calling the contact I made there and getting her sense and lay of the land has been really, really, important and positive in my professional life, so,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. I love that you use the Jill of all trades. I think I called it the Jane of all trades, but the Jill of all trades, as as the J as the HR generalist. And you talked a little bit about how, you have, like, a wide breadth of knowledge, but you said that it's
Mhm.
shallow. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what being an HR generalist means to you and how you've navigated your career in this space for a very large company?
So, realistically, we all have different definitions for a generalist.
Sure.
Probability is how we look at it, is how is it first described to us, and what is our particular role?
Yeah,
So for me, it's about the ability to swivel, to glide from one issue to the next. And the Pareto principle states that roughly 80% of the results come from 20% of the inputs. Once I learned that and I took it to heart, I realized that what my husband tells me regularly is perfection is the enemy of good enough. If I give you 80% of what you're looking for, it's probably satisfactory.
totally.
Perfection's not required. You're not gonna come back to me and say, "Leigh, where's that other 20%?" You're gonna
Right.
take that 80 and go, "I can work with this." So while my approach
Amazing.
isn't scattershot, I know a little bit about a whole lot of things, and I don't necessarily master anything. I'm definitely good enough to be a go-to person, but I'm not gonna sit here and tell you I'm the smartest person in the room because 'cause I'm not.
Same. Um, one thing I'm obviously very interested in is how your work intersects with immigration. So, again, we talked about how, or I introduced the episode as, I'm speaking a lot to like global mobility specialists. So, someone that might sit in your HR team that then is only dealing with the immigration program. And usually that's because the immigration program is so big or requires that type of, individual handholding. And I understand because we've worked and partnered together in the past. You support the immigration program, and how does that work for someone who is managing a tremendous amount of other things on your plate for the company? How do you make that work?
So, my organization does actually have a quote unquote global mobility group that deals with immigration, but they're dealing with it at the most broad. And then when it starts getting down to the individuals and the countries is where I come in. So, immigration wasn't a huge part with my prior employers. The organization I work for today is a multinational with operations in over 50 countries. We currently have 4 divisions and external counsel at the time, because we've changed counsel during my 10 years with the company.
Sure.
They found it really challenging to figure out who supports what division in the US. Just for my division, there are 5 generalists, and we support different VPs, we support different groups. And counsel at the time is like, "We only wanna deal with one person. Can you focus us?" Well, I grew up in a house where legal jargon was used all the time. My mother was a legal secretary, later a paralegal. So it's like, "Lead, you can actually read this stuff and get a clue." "Yeah, I can." They're like, "Okay, tag, you're it."
Yeah.
So I got selected from my division and then occasionally other divisions to be the person who had to go through, talk to counsel, and say, "Okay, what am I signing?" Read it, but then y'all would tell me what the heck I was signing. And so being nominated for that is how I got into it as the primary, but we don't have enough. That's not to say 30 isn't enough for the US alone, but it's not enough to make my job full time supporting immigration. But it's one of those quirky things where I actually have to use my brain, and I have fabulous managers. When I am dealing with these cases, and I think I've got 3 on my desk right now, I can tell my boss, "Leave me alone. I need half a day to go through these 3 on my desk, read everything, make sure
Right.
there's no edits I've gotta make, and move on."
Well, good. We'll be sure to check in with you to make sure they're done by the end of day. No, I'm just kidding. With that, it sounds like you have to, prioritize what's on your desk. How do you deal with the competing deadlines? Because things within at least US immigration, like there's not grace periods. Like it's very need to be on time, need to be accurate. And especially in the dynamic environment we're in today, there's no room for errors or
No, and
excuses. So
don't forget to put your signature on page 9 that you missed.
Yeah. Yeah, no missed signatures. So how are you balancing the competing deadlines, with managing, your immigration, which has these very hot, timely deadlines
Mhm.
with all the other things that you might be managing that also might have
I
tough
I am
deadlines.
a lot of people still haven't learned to say no,
Okay.
and so yeah. So I actually will, because we use Teams internally. So I will send a message to my boss going, I'm going on do not disturb for the next whatever time because I have to focus on this. If there's anything else, it'll either wait or go to one of my peers because
Okay.
my peers and I do talk. We know what each other's doing, maybe not in explicit detail, but enough to answer somebody's, frivolous question that they've gotta have right now.
Right, yeah, you're like, "Well, take a pause on that." Well, so it sounds like communication's key there, so when you're needing the focus time, you say, like, "I'm, kind of disconnecting so I can focus. If you need me, the questions will be answered tomorrow," that kinda thing. Yeah. Healthy boundaries, Lee.
Well, realistically, what do you have to have in the next 5 minutes?
Right, yeah, almost nothing. Yeah. I know. I struggle with that too, especially with, Slack and, I'll communicate
Mhm,
with many of my clients via Teams, and
mhm.
just because you have access to someone doesn't mean they owe you the response in the 2-minute time frame, that often those messages demand, that I'm learning the boundaries to, like, "Well, we'll answer you timely, it's just you don't need that answer," to your point, like, now, in the immediate. Yeah, exactly. But it is tough because when you get all those
Yeah.
pings, it kinda, amps you up a little bit.
Yeah, it does get to you.
Um, another sort of as a generalist question here, how do you work with vendors like Immigration Counsel to navigate the changes and challenges with new policies? So obviously, a lot about many things, but then when there's changes, how are you leveraging your counsel to guide you when that happens, which is happening a lot recently?
Yeah, oh, yeah, so that's definitely kind of heaven help us all. Because navigating the updates, the new laws, the
Yeah,
orders, and especially this year, it's gonna be really interesting because none of us know how they're really going to be
right,
implemented because there's always what's
right.
written down, and then there's the reality. We don't know. I mean, we're just now in February. New administration's only been in place 2.5 weeks. So yeah. So largely, counsel's going to tell me, what I need to do to help them complete their piece. But they're also gracious in that I'm asking them questions because I'm approaching it from a completely different side. It's like, okay, you're telling me this, but here's what my VP in this division for, Susie, who's coming here from, Timbuktu. I've got to look at it this way. So we've got to look at what's the objective. We know what the requirements are from the legal, at least how they're written, but we've also got to look at the is this a long-term assignment? Is it a permanent residency? Is this just a business visa? I mean, what and also what's going to be the best type of, for their situation? While also meeting the business needs, not just to, increase the fees, but what's gonna work for
Yeah,
us. And fortunately for me, I haven't had to work with a vendor that was exasperated by my questions so that I would, understand the process or the challenges a little bit better because they can put a halt to things, but by the same token, so can I. Because I may get really frustrated with, you're not hearing me. I'm putting a halt to this till I can
yeah, yeah,
get not necessarily the answer I want, because, for this particular person, but I need an answer that explains to me why are we going this route?
totally.
So,
And
yeah.
I really liked how you framed I mean, I think you framed it really well in that, you understand immigration in that, like, the rules may say one thing, but the way they're adjudicated can mean another. I feel like that is a
Mhm,
very nuanced understanding of how immigration landscape really operates, that not
mhm,
all foreign nationals or clients kind of understand. They're like, "Well, I see the qualifying criteria here." You're like, "Yeah, right. I see that too."
mhm,
But there's the interpretation, and that is sort of the biggest disconnect with clients, especially at the change of administration. So, I don't know if you've dealt with this recently because it is still so fresh, but I have clients that are, really wanting to travel and not understanding why they can't just go for a visa stamp immediately. And, we're saying like we're being very cautious because we're expecting some new travel guidance. They're like, well, I've read the headlines and, nothing's happening. And it's like today, there's nothing happening.
yeah, it's, early February.
Right, and so, having a partner like you to kinda just reinforce that, like, today, there's nothing there's no ruling, but how
Mhm,
dynamic the space is and how things are interpreted, is really, really important to sort of just
mhm.
understand the landscape of things, which was always good to work with you as a partner because you ask the right questions, right? I think that's really important to support your people. Um which is a good segue to chat about the issue, that WR we're really interested lately, the
Mhm,
change management. We've got this survey out. I know I sent it to you. We're
mhm,
fielding a survey through February 28th. We're recording here February 5th with Leigh. But the survey is all about how to navigate change management within an organization. And, it's sort of zeroed in on the change of administration, the change of immigration policies, and how organizations are reacting. And I know that you know something about this because, as a leader within your organization, change happens all the time. You're navigating that for benefits, benefit policies, return to office, the COVID era issues, obviously immigration. Tell us a little bit about how you lead these issues, any best practices, again, kind of big picture. Whenever you're navigating change for a lot of people, how do you
yeah,
do it?
changes change is uncomfortable, and we do have to remind people it's also inevitable.
Right.
In the past 2 years, our organization has rolled out significant training on this specific topic. People
Okay.
leaders and HR across the whole of the organization, we attended a multi-day session where we were divided into small groups. And we were told, and our workbooks had us focus on current issues. What's going on in your small group? So basically, pick a person, and we are going to create steps toward a solution utilizing, workbook templates, stuff that, we had a third party put together for us. But they were very easy to use, they were very clear. And the sessions that I attended, we used the John Cotter 8-step model for leading change as our guide. And with each breakout group being comprised of individuals from very different parts of the business, there was actual discussion. There was listening as each individual brought forth their perspective of the problem. Because while we all knew of a particular issue, our views on it were vastly different because of where we fit in the organization. So the shop floor was able to tell a manager from R&D how their design isn't gonna work for production. Great design, but, for us to make it every day, large scale, yeah, this isn't gonna work. And so the process started with answering some of the absolute most basic questions as opposed to diving in scattershot, which is how a lot of people go in. So we had to slow down. And in this session, we're asking, what is changing? What is driving this change? What's staying the same? Because there are going to be some things that actually stay the same. What are the benefits gonna be? And you know what? What's gonna get in the way? Because something is gonna blow up, kinda like my systems today. So there's a higher probability of moving a change to the desired outcome as those questions provide clarity at the beginning. So you're
Yeah.
going to have uh, really the 8-step Cotter model is really basic. And if you just start with those and then you use, a racing matrix, who's going to be responsible? Who's accountable? Who needs just to be informed? And you start plugging in those blocks. You're communicating what you need to communicate to who you need to communicate, as well as those who just, they're not going to pay attention anyway. They just need to be able to find it in their email somewhere. I mean,
Yeah, very practical, but it sounds like, I'm hearing the principles of, slow down, be
mhm.
intentional, listen, and gather the perspective, which I think is really tough, as someone who both has, had to accept change or lead change. I don't know that I'm doing all those steps, as well as I could
Is
be, but
anybody?
knowing how yeah, self-awareness is important. Um but as someone who's, like, leading it, that's really cool that you all did, like, a workshop on it, and I really like, the sort of workbook angle and hearing the perspective of R&D to shop floor, and that these people are both experts in what they do and then can come to very different conclusions and say, like, "This is why it's not gonna work."
Because
Um,
how often does your salaried expert engineer go talk to the blue collar person who's actually making the part?
sure. Yeah, I mean, probably not. They're like, "How come they just can't do it?" Or whatever, right? Yeah.
It's so
Um
easy.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really positive from just like that the next time something happens, they'll have that perspective of like, how does this impact someone and can appreciate whether that's the communication or, yeah, reaching out to them saying, like, is this feasible? That kind of thing. It sounds like a lot of, and we talked about this in our prep call, when you're leading change management, if you're at the forefront of it, it's a lot of hand holding. It's a lot of one on one attention, which I don't know that a lot of people want to do or are frankly capable of doing it. So tell us, about when you've had to do this, what your outcomes have been or what your perspective has been.
It comes up more often than we even want to admit. And while sending people to trainings is absolutely wonderful, attendees are gonna get something out of the session. Even if they
Sure.
don't get the whole thing, they're gonna get something. Even if it's just the candy I provided for you at the session. Um,
Sounds like a
the
treat.
one I
Yeah.
went to the one I went to was here in Texas. I live in Midland. There is a candy manufacturer here in Midland called Susie South 40, and of course, everything's Texas themed, and it's packaged in oil drums full of candy. So,
Okay, cool.
even if you only got an oil drum full of candy, you'll
Yeah.
got something.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
living in a fast-paced world like we do today, everybody's looking for an instantaneous answer, and heaven forbid that response is not provided in 30 seconds or less. So once we leave the session, and my session was a year and a half ago, the workbooks are put away. Nothing's changed. Yeah, we learned about it, but yeah, okay. And it's our nature to go back to what we've been doing because, it's been working well enough. So repetition is the key aspect to learning. We know this, we've been taught this. And depending on the source, it's not uncommon to hear, the 2-7 rule that suggests that we need to hear something, if you're really good, only twice, but generally 5 to 7 times for it to sink in, for it to move from short term to long term memory. And the hand holding comes into play when, we're walking the individual through that change management model that they heard about. So they've heard it once and then repeating it and focusing on the key aspects. Okay, remember this worksheet. Let's fill this out. What are you struggling with? And let's do that. We're going to answer those questions. We're going to space the information over a period of time. How long do we have to do this? And based on how that person learns. Once the managers worked through this methodology a couple of times, it generally sticks. Maybe not 100%, but enough for them to go on their own. And so the questions to us as HR become less frequent. We don't have to offer as many frequent flyer miles. So it works.
Yeah.
But it's that whole repetition.
So you're telling me that AI can't roll out change management? We can't just unleash the AI for these types of problems, Lee?
It depends on what it is. I'm not saying you can't.
Sure. Okay.
AI is a tool, and it's a tool that will streamline a multitude of processes. It does allow us to work more efficiently, to make better decisions. AI can actually quickly interpret data from multiple sources that are
Right.
seemingly unrelated, and they can pull it together. And then we've got, this wonderful answer. AI can improve our writing. If you use Chat GBT or whatever, it can improve your writing if you're not comfortable or confident in how you put things out there. It can also generate content. It can
Right.
support recruiting. What AI is not masterful at, in my opinion, is the human component. Because
Right.
with my role in HR, I am privy to information about certain individuals, about certain situations or projects. And I have information that an individual or about an individual family situation that's going to lead me in a completely different direction than AI because it's following a very prescribed program to get to those conclusions. So many of us have been frustrated when we're seeking new opportunities. I mean, think about it. If you are bored in your job and you start looking, so many places use, these systems now. The AI is programmed to search for keywords on a resume. A resume is only the most basic of outlines of what we've done in the past. It's a snapshot. It's not the broader picture. And so AI is going to throw out a lot of fabulous people because they're missing a key word.
That's a really good point. Um, no, I brought it up because, in the sense of when I think of the change management conversation we're having, I'm thinking a lot about the empathy and the time of walking someone through the change management model you discussed, and that the best success for the change management seems like a lot of time to get someone on board, and that, like, to your point, I mean, AI can do a lot of things as a tool in the sort of summarizing the meeting or
Mhm.
summarizing notes of the meeting, but I don't know that it necessarily
Right.
gets someone's perspective to change, and I think that's more
Ex-
through the connection you're describing
mhm. Yeah,
and
because
have
I do
mastered.
have information the AI isn't going to have. So, yeah, I may know before anybody else that you're pregnant. You're taking time off in 5 months. AI doesn't know this. I may also know that
Totally.
you're retiring. AI
Right.
doesn't know this.
Totally. Well, Lee, what a pleasure. Thank you for telling us and teaching us, coaching us through what it looks like to be an HR generalist, to master HR and juggle a tremendous amount of issues, including immigration. I appreciate the perspective of how you as an HR generalist navigate immigration issues. And thanks for chatting with us today
Oh,
here on
you're
the Business
welcome.
Immigration Benchmark.
You are most welcome.
And I'll see you in October at the HR Southwest Conference.
You will. It is so if for those who want to check out conference, check out hrsouthwest.com. It'll give you the dates. We do not have the speaker lineup yet. We're not ready for that. So, but you will see the dates and what we have ready for you now. So, go there to
Will the
learn
baby
more.
cows be there again? Can we have confirmation on the baby cows?
Well, I believe I now it's a rumor. The
Okay,
rumor says the Highland cows were such a hit, they're coming back. But
amazing.
that also HR Southwest is in October.
Right.
So hopefully everything works out and we get to see them because they were a lot of fun.
They were among the top things I saw and experienced, last year
Mhm.
at the conference.
Oh, yeah. That and the massage chairs. Yes.
Ah, yes. Well,
Yeah.
Lee, thank you so much, and, we'll be in touch.
We will. So thank you. You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.